Hello everyone, I'm Elfels, coach of the Newport Noctiles, and welcome to my draft analysis for Season 10 of the Wooper Club League. This time around, I want to actually get a full season of content going, so I'll be starting with my draft and hopefully getting a video out after each week's match. My last coverage on this channel was over a few weeks of Season 8, which did include my playoffs run. I also didn't cover any of Season 9, but both of those seasons were talked about pretty in depth on the Wooper Club main channel, which I have linked in the description. Check those out if you're interested. So, to summarize those seasons though, I was a champion of Season 8 and co-champion of the multi-battle style of Season 9, so I guess that makes me the two-time defending champion going into Season 10. Hopefully we can win it all again, but I'm really just looking to have a fun season. It's looking pretty exciting because we're doing low tiers this time around. There are a lot of Pokemon that I was really excited to use going into the season, so I'm just going to get into it. First, I'd just kind of like to get into my drafting process, get into why I made some of the decisions that I did. So to describe how I look at it, I like to have a full draft planned out by the time my first pick is in place. I even playtest the team, usually something like the top 6 picks with a few of the lower tiers mixed in there on Showdown in the tier that represents the power level of the draft. In this case, I think the mons that I had required me to play an RU, so I playtested in there. And this process kind of helps with the cohesion of the team. Helps me understand what I'm strong against, what I'm weak to, and I can change up some of the lower tier picks to kind of patch up weaknesses if I need to. Of course, this strategy of having a top 6 in mind already doesn't always work out, since an important pick can get sniped away before I can get to it, so I made sure I was flexible, and I'll point out when my picks diverge from my initial plans. Lastly, I'll note that in the randomized draft order, I was the last pick, 12th out of 12 people, which is a bit unfortunate, but it also means I was able to make my draft picks 2 at a time, considering it's a snake draft. I was last in round 1, but also the first in round 2, so I make my picks together. It gives me a chance to make sure that my cores that I really want can be drafted together, and I have good team synergy because of that. So it's not all bad. With all that said, for my round 1 draft, I picked decidueye. So I had really wanted to start out my draft with Chandelure, as it's my all-time favorite Pokemon, and I thought it would have a chance to shine in low tiers with things like Chansey and Blissey being gone, and just things like Special Balls in general. But Chandelure was already drafted. That's just where Draft League lands you sometimes. It's unfortunate. But I did pick up Decidueye with my first pick, and I think it's great here for similar reasons. Ghost type, mixed attacker with overall decent offensive stats, solid but not amazing. Average bulk, mediocre speed. This guy would probably not be that great in standard draft, but in low tiers, the typing and balanced stat spread should be really good and allow me to pick whatever set I need in a given week. Ghost is one of the best offensive typings available, and Decidueye gets some amazing ghost moves to choose from. Shadow Ball is obviously a staple on the special side, but for the physical side we get Poltergeist, which absolutely murders things, Spirit Shackle, which is a more consistent option unique to Decidueye, and Shadow Sneak to choose from for physical moves. We also have pretty good coverage alongside that, with of course our Stab Grass moves, as well as Brave Bird and Hurricane, as Decidueye is a bird, Knockoff, and Low Sweep, and some utility as well with Defog, Roost, and U-Turn. That move pool and the stat spread lends itself pretty well to a ton of sets. Decidueye can actually run any of the 3 choice items really well, which is kind of funny to think about, and really unpredictable, honestly. And U-Turn helps with that quite a bit. We also get setup moves on both attacking sides with Swords Dance and Nasty Plot, so Decidueye can really pose a threat to just about anything. But defensive sets are also possible here. Decidueye's bulk is nothing to write home about, but 100 special defense is kind of nice. Decidueye can switch into a few water types and things like that, and we have support like Roost and Defog to take advantage of that. Diversity is the key here. Having such a diverse top tier mon as my first pick to build the rest of the team around is just something that I'm looking forward to have that freedom. Finally, I'll note that the grass typing on Decidueye, grass isn't the best defensive typing usually, but it's great for the ground resistance, which I think we are going to need because the next pick we made alongside Decidueye was a lowland Raichu. I really like the potential of this Pokemon as part of a terrain core. Raichu only costs 60 points, which is great. And to get into kind of the terrain core that I'm talking about here, In previous seasons, I thought that certain small weather cores, seen like hail cores or some small sun cores, worked really well. But auto weather is mostly banned in this format, with the exception of a few lower tier hail setters. So I thought a terrain core would be a really cool twist on that idea. Under electric terrain, Raichu outspeeds absolutely everything with Surge Surfer. Even without terrain, 110 base speed is actually really good for low tiers, outspeeds a lot of things. But that terrain is really boosting it. I think it even beats Scarf Excelgor, which it should be the fastest thing in the format. Also under terrain, Raichu's Rising Voltage also doubles in power on top of the boost already given to electric type moves. Off of a seemingly low 95 base special attack stat, that is actually hitting incredibly hard. It's basically an electric type nuke whenever I need one. And Raichu actually gets pretty solid coverage too, with of course Stab, Psychic, and Psyshock, but we also get Surf, Grass Knot, Focus Blast, Draining Kiss, and that knockoff for utility, so we can actually deal with a lot of things. As for moveset directions with those moves, Raichu is actually pretty basic. It becomes a really scary sweeper after a Nasty Plot boost, but it can also just be a really hard-hitting pivot with Volt Switch if you slap on a Choice Specs or something. Overall, really excited to see what Raichu can do this season. It's going to be pretty basic, I think. Special attacks are the name of the game, but under terrain, I am so excited to see what we can accomplish. These first two picks is why I really love low tiers. They're just two really interesting mons that could be my best performers that wouldn't get the spotlight in a normal draft format. To support those two, in the third slot I actually drafted noivern. So this is a Pokemon that I had my eye on, but I wasn't expecting it at all to make it down to round 3. I wasn't even planning on taking it, but I saw it down here and decided it has so many good traits that I couldn't pass it up. Initially, I wanted to draft Mantine in this slot because it is also a really good defensive flying type that would give a lot of support to my top two mons. I think it was sniped, and even if it hadn't been, I just love the idea of noivern so much that I probably would have switched anyway. But noivern just has so many good traits. I'll note that Nate with the Buffalo Bouffalant piloted a noivern really well in Season 8, so I think it's a really good pick even in Standard Draft League, so I think it's amazing down here, of course. Dragon Flying is a great defensive typing with a ground immunity that we need, as well as a fire resistance that I didn't have covered yet. But the main selling point of noivern, of course, is 123 base speed. That's incredible, especially in low tiers. It's one of the highest speed stats available down here. Having such high speed stat on the team gives me so much more flexibility. And on top of that, noivern gets two excellent abilities with Frisk to scout out for items, which is really important in Draft League, as well as Infiltrator to get around Substitute or Screens, which is a strategy you can maybe see telegraphed a little bit if you know what team you're prepping for. So these abilities and the move pool can lend themselves to a few different things. A bulky set with Defog and U-Turn is great for utility, just to pivot in and out of things to support my more offensive ones. We also can run a Stallbreaker set with Taunt and things like a hard-hitting stab move and Super Fang, similar to what I did with Crobat 2 seasons ago. Or noivern can use its decent 97 base special attack and just go all-out attacking with choice item. Draco Meteor and Hurricane are great stab moves for that, not to mention coverage like Flamethrower, Focus Blast, and Boom Burst. This is really here to fill whatever role I need it to with that amazing speed. It really enables my other team members to do their thing. So far, I have really good speed and offense with a lot of pivot moves thrown in there, but I realized at this point that I need to at least start building my defensive backbone, so my pick alongside noivern was Mudsdale, which is a really good physical wall that can hit back hard. The ground typing is really good, provides an important rock resist and an electric immunity that stops Volt Switchers from running around crazy and all that. You know how it is. Its stats on the physical defensive side aren't the best. 100 HP and 100 defense is of course solid, but stamina is really what pushes this past the edge, really helping us take physical moves like nobody's business. And it's also really good against things like multi-hit moves, which are actually not that uncommon on the physical side. There are especially a lot of flying types running around with dual wing beat this season, for example. Spoiler alert, excuse me. Mudsdale is my only stealth rock user, and while I wish I could have fit another rocks user somewhere, I think it works really well as a rocker and a good just defensive tank that I could bring every week almost if I need to. So I don't feel too bad about this being my only rocker. Coverage includes Earthquake, of course, Rock Slide, Heavy Slam, and Body Press, which works really well with stamina, stacking the defense boosts. Overall, this is a really straightforward defensive tank. You can run physically defensive, of course, as probably the main set I will be looking at, but an Assault Vest set is also possible, and so is Choice Band for more offensive options. 125 base attack with Stab Earthquake will always lend itself to a solid offensive threat if I need it. With the first part of my defensive core out of the way, I was eager to get back on my offensive side here, so I actually drafted the 80-point Blaziken, which is allowed in our draft without speed boost, so we're running Blaze. Blaziken, of course, is going to be a devastating mixed wall breaker with 120 attack, 110 special attack as its base stats. Firefighting coverage with that is just so hard to switch into. And as a special attacking fighting type, it is a pretty rare sight and something that we can use to our advantage as a wall breaker. On top of the stab coverage, Knockoff, Earthquake, Stone Edge, Rock Slide, Brave Bird, I guess Blaziken is another bird, that's cool, and even terrain boosted Thunder Punch, provided we get electric terrain, are available for coverage. Blaziken with those moves can of course run the standard wall breaker set, but we also have things to patch up our speed like Choice Scarf or Agility, and we can also be a utility attacker with something like Defog. This is yet another U-turn user to help out with those rolls, so that's even more potential to put pressure on walls and keep momentum going for our team, which we will need because we are definitely an offensive team so far. Alongside that, I drafted Pink Urchin. This guy was drafted for Electric Surge and Electric Surge only, no other reason. But it actually does provide some benefits realistically. Pink Urchin is going to be my other hazard setter with access to spikes and toxic spikes, and it's actually bulky enough to take a few hits and recover back up, so it's a decent support option. It's a decent standalone electric type with a strong rising voltage, of course, even uninvested, and Scald for coverage, which is interesting. So it can run defensive or even an offensive set if you want. As a standard alone electric type, lack of Volt Switch is pretty unfortunate, but the team already has a lot of pivot moves, so it's okay. And lastly, stacking with Raichu is also unfortunate for the ground weakness, but that's why we'd have decidueye and noivern, hopefully enough to deter those ground types from spamming Earthquake and things like that. I drafted Pink Urchin a little late compared to Raichu, considering I wanted those two as a core together, but I was kind of depending on the fact that nobody else really was looking at electric terrain, but I'm glad I drafted it here because I believe just a few picks later in the draft, someone else had been looking to grab Pink Urchin, so glad my game plan didn't get messed up. That would have been pretty bad. These are kind of the core 6 that I'm looking to work with. It's a very offensive team so far, so I was looking to kind of fill out my defensive core a little bit more as I get to the lower tiers. And so I started this with the, there it is, with the 20-point Berserker. Steel types are pretty limited down here, so I dipped down to 20 points for mine. I actually think Berserker is pretty underrated though, especially in low tiers. For my steel types, I was looking at things like maybe Mawile as an option. It does get rocks, but I do think Berserker is actually better and cheaper, so I went for this pretty early. It's decently bulky, with Assault Vest potentially boosting that lower special bulk, and Steel typing, of course, allowing it to switch into a lot of different threats. Has incredible power, actually, with 110 base attack, and its choice of abilities. Steely Spirit essentially gives a Choice Band boost to Steel-type moves, while Tough Claws gives a Life Orb boost to contact moves. So it'll actually be punching above its weight class quite a bit. Can wall break if it needs to, but that's not even why I need it. It also happens to get a lot of coverage with Iron Head, Close Combat, Seed Bomb, Gunk Shot, Play Rough, and Crunch, and it is another U-turn user for momentum. So yeah, very diverse for a 20-pointer, and the stats aren't bad, so I'm actually really excited to see what Berserker can do. I think it was quite underrated going into this draft. Alongside Berserker, I drafted Aromatise. This actually forms a decent bulky core with it. It's a solid, specially defensive Pokemon, which I was lacking up to this point. 101 HP and 89 special defense is okay. It's solid special defense, and hopefully we'll see it tank a few things. It has Wish and Aromatherapy, so it's great support for some of my defensive mons that tend to get chipped down, like Mudsdale and Berserker, of course. And Aromatise actually makes me immune to Taunt here, which is great for the cleric role that I'm hoping to fill with aromatise. We also get Trick Room and a decent special attack stat, so we have the potential to go offensive as well, but I don't see that happening too much. Aromatise was an interesting pick. I was actually debating hard between this and Comfey as my fairy type picks to complement Berserker. Ended up going with this because Aromatise is overall bulkier with a much higher HP stat to work with. So let's see if that pans out. Alright, we're getting close to the end of the draft here, and I went with Kangaskhan as my third to last pick. Provides another decently bulky option, and normal coverage with Scrappy is actually just really good. Teams tend to carry Ghosts to check normal type moves, with Steel types being fairly limited in this format, and Rock types being a little shaky on the defensive side, with their several weaknesses. Some teams might not have switch-ins to a Choice Banded, Body Slam, or Double Edge, but we don't even need to invest to just hit things hard with a Body Slam on a defensive set, for example. And that's on top of the move pool of a Generation 1 normal type. We get coverage like Earthquake, the Elemental Punches, Aqua Tail, Crunch, and Drain Punch, as well as some good utility in Fake Out, Sucker Punch, Power Up Punch, Yawn, or Wish. Base 90 speed tier also fills an important gap between Blaziken and Raichu that we definitely needed help with. And the Wish support, as I mentioned, that's nice, but I think that role is already covered by Aromatise pretty well. It is just nice to have our options, though. Alongside Kangaskhan, I drafted Lapras. I initially had Clowitzer in this spot, but it was sniped shortly before I could get to it. As another bulky option for my water type, I actually considered Walrein, which is cheaper by 20 points and has thick fat, but I did settle on Lapras, which I think between the options of Clowitzer and Walrein, Lapras is probably the best option for me. It fits my team's water type slot well, thanks to having really high HP, getting good bulk. I need another bulky Pokemon in that slot. Drafting a lot of powerful threats early on meant that I sacrificed getting a higher tier water type. Like I said, I would have loved to have Mantine up there in my higher tiers, but didn't quite get it in favor of Noivern. So at this penultimate pick, I had to settle for Lapras, but it does act as a pretty good special wall when invested, and we do already have Wish support from 2 other Pokemon on the team. Water Absorb gives us a neat water immunity to stop some of the higher tier water types from just running us over. And this is close to the truest ice resist you can get, with the secondary ice typing to get a quad ice resist and avoid the freeze dry weakness that most water types have. So this is a pretty good mon with some good qualities. We also have a decent base 85 special attack to fire off some special attacks from a choice spec set, for example. We have the standard water and ice coverage, as well as the great freeze dry, as well as things like Psychic and Thunderbolt, which is potentially boosted by terrain. And then Lapras has Heal Belt, which is great for backup cleric purposes behind Aromatise. So kind of something I settled for near the end of the draft, but still something I am excited to use. Lastly, to wrap up the draft, we have Fievel, which is at 20 points. It's not a very good Pokemon. I mean, look at those stats. They're not great. But I just really personally like it, and I think it's kind of overlooked overall. I think this is my best chance to try to make it work. Dark type is, of course, solid defensively, gives me some resistances to Ghost and Dark that Decidueye and Raichu are weak to, and it stops Psychic Span by being immune to it, of course. Like I said, stats aren't the best. They're a bit disappointing overall, but the abilities are the selling point here. Stakeout turns choice specs into a threatening wall breaker, hitting extremely hard on anything switching into Dark Pulse, Psychic, or Burning Jealousy. With choice specs, we do kind of fill the special breaker spot left by not getting Cloudster. How well we fill that spot, we'll see, but it's just something I'm interested in seeing how well it'll do. But the other ability I'm interested in, Fievel does get Unburden. It's probably the worst fully evolved Unburden Sweeper, but it is an Unburden Sweeper. It gets Nasty Plot, and it can use Electric Seed along with our terrain to get that speed boost. so it could potentially be a late game sweeper. I'm hoping that it'll work well for that role. We'll see. So this is the team we're working with. Looking at the raw numbers for roles filled, we have hazard control, only 2 hazard users in Mudsdale and Pink Urchin, but at least all 3 hazards are represented if we need any of them. 3 defog users, all in the relative high tiers, which is nice. I think hazard control is a little lacking for us, but I'm satisfied with it overall. It's going to be okay. For clerics, we have 2 heal bell users in aromatise and lapras, as well as 3 wish users in aromatise, kangaskhan, and actually Raichu of all things, which I didn't realize until now. Cleric duties end up being pretty well represented actually, which is odd, but I'm happy to rely on aromatise for that kind of role whenever I need it. I don't think I'm going to be looking at kangaskhan, Raichu, or lapras as my main clerics. Looking at priority, it's actually kind of weird. Decidueye and blaziken have really good stab priority to abuse, but just about everything else has really niche priority to pick up maybe quick KOs or chip damage. Like, Ice Shard is certainly a good option on Lapras, and the presence of multiple Fake Out and Sucker Punch users is cool, but we definitely won't be relying on those for kills or anything. The item removal is also decent with 4 Pokemon that can all viably use Knockoff. Momentum is very well represented. This is kind of the main selling point here of our utility roles, with 6 of our 11 Pokemon able to use some combination of U-turn, Volt Switch, or Parting Shot respectively. Raichu even gets Teleport in there, even though I don't think we need it with Volt Switch already present. But hey, the more the merrier as far as options. So the main theme here is just Pokemon that I'm really excited to use, but wouldn't get a good chance to in regular draft seasons. We see a lot of potential sweepers and wall breakers, as well as a lot of pivoting options to get into those threats. As a result of these picks, the defensive and support backbone was more of an afterthought this time around, which is not usually how I team build and play. Think the Heatran and Tangrowth core from Season 8 that I really relied on as a defensive backbone. I don't have anything like that this time, but hopefully I should have enough options to pivot around to my offensive pieces and still take games like that. However the season goes results-wise, I'm hoping to have a ton of fun with this team, and I know, like, at the time of recording this, I'm about to get into my first match tomorrow, so I'm just super excited to get into it. Before I wrap up the video, a few thank yous. First, big thanks to the Whooper Club for inviting me back for another season. Doesn't seem like much to invite back a regular, but hey, it does mean a lot, and I'm happy to be here. Next, shout out to Nate or Illogic for inspiring me to make analysis videos about my time in the league. Nate, hopefully I can actually follow in your footsteps and really record a full season of content this time. I really want to. Nate's Whooper Club videos are basically what inspired me to start creating my own content, so go check him out. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. And finally, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I love playing and talking about this game, so if you're still listening, I appreciate you. That's about it, so once again, thanks for watching, and stick around for the rest of the season. It'll be a fun one. See ya!